Do you want to improve your gardening skills, but you don't know where to start? You came to the right place, because in this video we'll discuss about 5 essential gardening skills that in my opinion you need to improve every gardening season. Did you know that dancers practice the basic steps every single day to make it second nature? Like them, also us, gardeners, should train our gardening skills with every opportunity. But unfortunately, our practice session is not a few hours long. Instead, our training day is one gardening year. That's why it's much more important to practice these 5 essential gardening skills every single growing season. If we improve our basic gardening skills and we make them second nature, we'll enjoy more in our gardens, and in the end, we'll grow more. So without further ado, let's find out what essential gardening skills you should train every gardening season. The very first skill that is hard to master, because we have 1, maybe 2 opportunities per year to practice it, is the skill of planning your garden. With it, I mean how to plan where and when you will be planting every single plant to maximize the yields and increase fruit production. Many of you would probably think now, that's easy. I'll just go on the internet, search when to plant what, and that's it. But will you take into consideration your microclimate, your microlocation regarding to the sun, the position of your plants in the garden, and all the other small factors that are very important when planning your garden? Most certainly not. That's why it's very important to look at all the plants growing in your garden and how they behave year after year. To make an example, last year I grew my tomatoes, like I had explained in my 9 gardening mistakes video, in the wrong place in my garden. I planted them in the shade of some trees, in the shade of the garden shed that's on the property. This shade is casted only in the summer, when the sun moves its sunset position more northwest, and I couldn't know that the first year gardening. But I watched and learned. So this year I planned to have my tomatoes in an area of the garden that gets full sun all day long. When learning how to plan for your garden, it's also important to master when to plant what. This is not only important for your vegetables like tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers and eggplants that requires long growing seasons to mature, but it's also important if you want to have 2 harvests of, let's say, broccoli per growing season. Last year was a first for me, for many vegetables, including broccoli. I planted them in August expecting a full harvest, and it came in around 85 days. And this led me thinking. My growing season is around 165 days. This means that if I can prolong it just for 1 week or 2, I could plant my broccoli twice a year, increasing my potential harvest by 100%. 100% more in the same space. That's how effective can be a good plan. And with broccoli is that much easier, because it can tolerate a light frost. That means that I can plant it without problems 2 weeks before the first frost date, protect it with a row cover and wait. So try to improve your planning skills every year. Every year observe where you can improve your planting position or planting timing. But how I knew that broccoli needs 85 days to maturity from transplants? This is another essential skill that we need to talk about, and that is knowing your plants. With this, I don't mean that you know that you're planting tomatoes instead of cucumbers. No. With this I mean that you learn the plants that you love to grow. That we learn their timing, so when to plant them. That you learn their weather preferences, so that you know if you need to plant them in a half shade or in full sun. That you learn their pests, so that you will easily protect them. And after all, to learn what plants they love to grow with, so that you will choose better companion plants. The best way to learn this skill is to make as many notes as possible, in whichever form you like. For me it's easy. I have every single step documented with my videos. So I know exactly what I did with a specific plant each year and how it behaved. Did it grow better? Did it grow faster? Did it had more pests? And after all, did it taste great? All of this is important when planning, when taking care of the plants, and after all, when deciding what you will plant this year. So the best way to improve the gardening skill of plant knowledge, besides documenting everything in your garden and subscribing to my channel to learn more gardening tips, is to plant every year a new plant. With this, you will expand the knowledge of the plants that you know to grow, and on top of that, add new plants to your knowledge base every single year. And if you don't grow something just because you think you don't like it, try to grow it yourself. You probably already know what's the difference between store-bought tomatoes and homegrown. But do you know what's the difference with all the vegetables? When learning your plants, one skill that is also very important but deserves its own segment is the gardening skill of starting your plants from seed. In my opinion, this is an essential skill to master if you want to become an experienced gardener, because only with it you'll be able to grow varieties that are not accessible in your local stores. You'll be able to grow dozens of tomatoes varieties if you'd like to, or just one, but it will be up to you and not up to your local seedling stores. I know that your first gardening month is not the perfect time to learn, to grow all the vegetables that you plan to grow from seed. For that, I suggest you to leave a few square feet in the garden as a training ground, and also try to start your seedlings for the fall garden. And if you don't know what you can grow for a fall garden, watch the video that is pinned on the top right corner. The very first year, I learned how to start my lettuce from seed in my raised beds, and then I went to learning how to start my seedlings indoors. One push for that was the single seed challenge that my buddy Scott made. With it, I pushed my boundaries, failed, but also learned a lot of new things. The next skill that I will try to improve with every gardening year, and that I think is the most important of them all, is the skill of growing my own soil. Once I heard somewhere, and it stuck into my head, something on the lines: the first skill a garden should learn is the skill of growing its own soil. When the soil be right, the plants won't have a problem growing it. And I couldn't agree more on that. I learned by doing many soil experiments in my garden, from testing how to mend my clay soil, to test which soil mix is the best for growing potatoes, that soil can have a drastic impact on the vegetables that you grow in. Because your garden soil contains all the nutrients that your plant will need, but also can contain some diseases, it's most important that you learn how to grow it, to make it more fertile and more disease-free. And I wouldn't recommend to use artificial fertilizers to grow your own soil. Heck, I wouldn't recommend to use organic fertilizers either. But why? The first problem with fertilizers that you have is that it's most likely that you didn't do a full check of your soil composition and texture, so you probably don't know what is already in it. So how you'll be able to decide what is missing and what you need to add? And by adding something wrong can be worse than adding nothing. That is why I prefer to grow my own soil, and I do it with my homegrown compost. In my opinion, this is the most balanced and natural way how you can add nutrients and beneficial bacteria to your soil without destroying the delicate balance of it. And to make your homegrown compost, you will need to train another gardening skill: composting. Composting is another essential skill of every gardener, in my opinion. With it, you will save a lot of money and trouble in the long run. The money will be saved on soil amendments and new plants that won't thrive in an unbalanced soil. And the trouble will be saved on disease control, because healthier plants are more resistant to harmful diseases. And don't think that because you have a small garden, you can't grow your own compost. Look at me and my small garden. Last year I managed to produce around 30 cubic feet of compost, and this year I'm on a good path to it. My compost bin is almost a third full by now. You can start by building a simple compost bin and throwing in it all the kitchen and garden waste. And I promise you will enjoy your first harvest of compost next year, before the gardening season starts. I made my first compost bin out of pellets last year, before even building my first raised bed, and it served me well. I learned a lot of new things, and because of that, I needed to upgrade to a bigger compost bin system. But as you can see, my first compost bin is doing its job even today, producing some fresh compost for my mother-in-law. So you can start improving those essential gardening skills by learning what is the best soil you can use to grow potatoes in grow bags. All you will need to learn about it is in this video that pop on the screen. In it, I'm performing a test to see which soil mix will give me the biggest yields, will have the least weeds in it, and which will retain moisture the best. Every time I think about it, I still can't believe what the results were. What is the skill you need to learn the most? Leave a comment down below to let me know. I hope you learned something new today, and if you did, smash that like button and subscribe for more gardening tips and tricks. Happy gardening!